Now on the Georgia Vote.
You're running?
Could be.
He went from could be to I'm in. We sit down with Brad Raffensperger, who hopes to become Georgia's next governor. Trump administration officials flood the state, focusing on Georgia's economy and its veterans. And he's only 25 years old, but this Democrat hopes to make his political debut by winning a statewide race. It's all right now on the Georgia Vote.
From the 11 Alive studios, this is the Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, good Sunday morning. Welcome in. Faith is off this week. Now, look, if you are a voter, you have a lot to think through over the next few months, and you've got a lot of candidates to choose from. The latest in the governor's race is Republican Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger. He rose to national prominence in the wake of the 2020 election, earning praise from some corners of the political world and condemnation from others, sometimes from inside his own party. We talked one-on-one this week about his record and his goals. Why do you want to be Georgia's next governor?
I want to be governor to make Georgia affordable and safe. Simple as that. If you look at what's happened over the last several years, we had really high inflation under the Biden administration. And one way of really solving the affordability issue is obviously tamp down inflation, control that, but also get incomes up. And you do that with advanced technology, proven and cutting edge technologies that are coming back to America.
You said you think most Americans and most Georgians feel like they want their jobs back in the United States. But many Americans, many Georgians also want low prices. And it was that tension that many business leaders would say led to them offshoring a lot of industry and a lot of manufacturing jobs. How specifically do you bring those jobs back to the United States?
It really has to be value add. You look at how, Governor Kemp has been working tirelessly, on his trips recently to Germany, Canada, Korea, Japan, South America, to look at companies that want to reshore, maybe not 100% of their production, but enough for the American market, because they understand that America is tired of people taking advantage of us. We're looking for fair trade, balanced trade, so that we have our fair share and we have our industrial base back.
Elections are an integral part of our American experiment. In 2020, you were a fierce defender of the validity of Georgia's election results. Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, then a state senator, questioned the validity of those results. You are both now running in this Republican primary for governor. What's your message to him right now?
My message is to the voters of Georgia, we've secured the vote. No matter how you vote, we have photo ID for absentee voting. We think that's really important. In fact, when I ran back in 2018, I said, you have signature match. I would like to shore that up with photo ID. And then we finally got that in 2021. So photo ID no matter how you vote. I've done 3 audits now of citizenship to verify only American citizens are on the voter rolls. We've got 2 under our belt already done, and some states hadn't done a single one. Now we're doing the 3rd audit right now. And finally, we have an administration that's partnering with us and not charging us for every query. In fact, they said, when you want to ask about this person, we'll give you that information for free.
In 2020 and in 2021, President Trump very publicly criticized your handling of the 2020 election here in Georgia. At a rally here in Georgia last year, President Trump said you were disloyal, and he said you were doing everything possible to make 2024 difficult for Republicans to win. That was a quote of his. If you're elected governor, you've got to work with the federal government. How do you do that with President Trump?
I'm not too worried about that, because if you look at the important issues that he's focused in on right now, those are issues that are important for me and also our fellow Georgians. Number one, secure the border. Then the other big focus that they have right now in the administration is reshoring manufacturing back to America. That means bringing good paying jobs, great paying jobs, 6-figure jobs back to America in high-tech manufacturing.
In 2021, delegates at the state GOP convention, they censured you. This year, they voted to ban you from qualifying as a Republican in upcoming elections. That was a mostly symbolic vote, but you've taken some heat from Republicans in this state. Do you feel like there is a place for you in Republican politics in Georgia right now?
Well, let me really be clear about this. I am a conservative Republican. I've always been a conservative Republican. In fact, I think I probably came out of my mama's belly as a conservative Republican. My sister used to poke fun at me, but gave me a little Post-it mark from a diet in the world conservative that I could send out to folks. So my family has known that I've been a conservative all my life. Nothing's changing on that because I believe in our principles.
Do you feel like some of the party has moved past you?
Well, I don't think so because I won with a real strong re-election in 2022, so I'm not too worried about that. But they know that I stand strong on principles. I think that really what's important is that I honor the Constitution, that I'm honest, that I have integrity. And if people are looking for someone that will tell them the truth, always, no matter how hard it is to hear, then they're looking at the right person.
That is just a part of our conversation. You can watch our full interview streaming right now on 11 Alive Plus. There you can hear Raffensperger's response to a proposal to eliminate Georgia's income tax. Raffensperger, he faces other Republican contenders in that race, including Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Attorney General Chris Carr. Democrats have lots of options, too. Right now, their primary field features at least 5 major candidates. One of them is former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms. She was in Albany Tuesday, and she sat for a radio interview on Wednesday. During her appearance on The Breakfast Club, Bottoms defended her decision as mayor to greenlight a new public safety training center that opponents call Cop City.
Because we didn't have a state-of-the-art facility. And again, going into the morale and whatever your thoughts are, again, on public safety, when you have police officers, when you have firefighters, when you have people, EMS, paramedics, they have to be trained somewhere. They don't just show up and get put out on the street. And we needed a new facility in Atlanta to do that.
Mm-hmm. Also this week, the Bottoms campaign released a poll from a firm called Public Policy Polling that shows her as the leader among Democrats running for governor, at least right now. The PPP survey shows Bottoms with 38% support from likely Democratic primary voters, followed by former DeKalb County CEO Mike Thurmond, former Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, who was a Republican for most of his political life until he entered this race as a Democrat. Also former State Senator Jason Estevez, State Representative Derek Jackson, and Olu Brown in this poll. Another key number you got to pay attention to, 36% said they were undecided in this poll, and the margin of error is just under 4%. PPP polled, they say, 620 likely Democratic primary voters. The poll was taken over 2 days in the middle of September. All right, this is a great time to bring in our political roundtable. Today joining us, we have Spiro Amburn. He's the Senior Vice President at McGuire Woods Consulting. Previously served as Chief of Staff for Republican Georgia House Speakers John Burns and David Ralston. Also joining us today, Democratic strategist Fred Hicks, founder and president of the Hicks Evaluation Group that's worked with hundreds of political campaigns for nearly 20 years. And Thomas Wheatley joining us today. He's the Atlanta-based Axios reporter who previously wrote for Atlanta Magazine and Creative Loafing. Let's start with that poll, and let's start with you, Fred. What's the biggest takeaway from those polling numbers we just saw in the Democratic gubernatorial primary?
Absolutely. So Zach, Spiro, and Tom, to me, this poll is a reflection of name ID. And so the results are pretty much what I would have expected. The former mayor of Atlanta should be leading the field. The former CEO of DeKalb County, one of Georgia's largest, should be second. Jeff Duncan has a lot of name ID, for better or for worse, if you're a Democrat. And then Jason Estevez and the others are there. So I think at this point it shows what I would expect. The one surprise is that Mayor Bottoms is ahead of undecideds, and that's something you always want if you're in the middle of a campaign. You want to be ahead of undecideds.
And Spiro, this is a poll that her campaign released, though, as well. Do you have to view internal polls that are released that show the candidate in a favorable light with maybe a grain of salt or two at this early stage of the campaign?
Probably, but I mean, that's the only data we have to go on right now. So I think that it's significant. And you look at those other numbers, I think particularly the undecided number, that number is going to stay, pretty high until 36% closer to the election.
Thomas, is that where the real challenge for everybody in that field is, that trying to sway those undecided voters?
That's going to be the biggest challenge, yes, especially with somebody like Bottoms who has a really good network. I mean, you look at some of her supporters, Tyler Perry, and she has that name ID mainly from during the pandemic, quarreling with Governor Brian Kemp.
The mayor of Georgia's capital city and Georgia's largest city. She's got a big profile, but there are other serious contenders in that race, too. Let's shift gears and talk about the Republicans, because there are serious contenders on that side of the race as well. We just saw in this Brad Raffensperger interview, Secretary of State looking to become Georgia's next governor. He faces Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones and Attorney General Chris Carr in this primary. Spiro, will Georgia primary Republican voters accept Brad Raffensperger as a candidate in this race?
Oh, I think they will accept him. I mean, he got reelected in 2022, faced a primary challenger, so I think he is a very viable candidate.
But there were some crossover voters in that 2022 primary from the Democratic Party, weren't there?
There were, and there's always going to be a little bit of that. You know, but you go back 8 years. I mean, we had a Secretary of State at the time, Brian Kemp, I think was his name. A lot of so-called experts didn't think he had a chance, and running as Secretary of State, he proved that you can win the governor's office from that position. So another thing to point out about Brad Raffensperger is that he has the ability to self-fund, which obviously so does Lieutenant Governor Jones. So that'll be interesting to see how that matchup plays out.
Fred, we've got about 20 seconds. What are your thoughts on where the Republican primary stands right now?
I think it's very interesting to piggyback on where Spiro left off. Chris Carr seems to be the odd person out in this situation. You have two candidates who can self-fund, two candidates who've won contested statewide elections, and then you have Chris Carr.
And I think, though, his campaign would say, look, it's a long run still to go, and you've got three serious candidates in this race. Always a lot to talk about. We will be right back with more after the break. Just a few minutes ago here on the Georgia Vote, you saw an interview with Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, but he is, of course, running for governor now, so his current job as Secretary of State will be open in 2026. A Democratic political newcomer hopes to take it. 25-year-old Marietta native Adrian Consonery Jr. now running for that job after he says he had his own issues casting a ballot in Georgia. He talked with our Faith Jesse.
You don't have a lot of statewide recognition yet. Why are you deciding to run for Secretary of State at 25 years old?
Well, it all starts back in 2020. I was a student at Grambling State University, and I was sending in my absentee ballot to have my voice heard in the democratic process of choosing leaders. And instead of me getting the receipt saying that, oh, your vote has been casted, instead I was told my vote had been challenged, and I had 3 days to come back to the state to prove I was who I said I was, or else my vote was being thrown out. This happened for the primary and the general elections, and I fought both times for my vote to go through.
So this happened to you twice?
Twice in the same year.
What was the reasoning?
They said my signatures didn't match. And I was very concerned because my signature matched that of which was on my driver's license, what I had to submit in order to even get a ballot to come to me. And for me to have that type of thing happen twice, I felt, well, this is no coincidence. So I began going down the rabbit hole of voting rights, working in all different types of areas, especially working with nonpartisan organizations all across the country, going into communities and making sure that people knew the right to vote and the resources that they had available in order to let their voice be heard. But when it came time to start to think about how I could really make an impactful difference, I got tired of going against the system, and I said, if I want to see the change happen, I need to be the change.
What are some of the policies that Brad Raffensperger, current Secretary of State, has enacted that you just don't see eye to eye on and you'd like to come in there and change that?
Right. Well, one thing I will say is, and I do have to at least commend him for standing up for the integrity of the Georgia vote when it came to a certain someone trying to ask for 11,270 votes.
Back in 2020, the phone call with President Donald Trump.
But the thing that I don't like that has persisted is these purging of the voter rolls that continuously happens by the hundreds of thousands that continues to take place. And you know, it's this use it or lose it mentality that comes into play with people's voting rights. And there are a couple other states that do this. I want to say it's around 9 states that use this type of practice. But the problem that has me fixated on this is that the more that you purge people from the voter rolls, the more you silence them. And if someone were to look at this political climate that we have right now, but let's say they haven't voted in a few election cycles, but they've always maintained their registration, but now they're being purged from it. You're having a barrier to entry into participating in this process. Now you're not allowing them to have their voice heard. And you're disenfranchising honest Georgians. You're not giving them their power and their resources to let change happen. So what is this premise that is taking place? And it's not primarily on just Raffensperger, but he is the one that is over the position. So when I come into this position, I want to enact something that allows for us to maintain the registration rolls, still maintain maintenance, but not silence our voters.
That is just a part of that conversation. Faith's full interview with Adrian Consonery Jr. It's available right now on 11 Alive Plus. There was a lot of interest in a Georgia special election runoff this week. The District 21 seat in the state Senate, after all that attention, will stay in Republican hands. Jason Dickerson survived a primary challenge from 5 other Republicans to get into the runoff, and then voters gave him the victory over Democrat Deborah Shigley in that election. Dickerson will replace fellow Republican Brandon Beach, who is now the U.S. Treasurer. Let's bring the panel back in here. Guys, this race got a lot of attention from statewide and national figures. Fred, Democrats still lost this race. Was the effort worth the outcome?
Oh, absolutely. You always have to test your GOTV, your turnout models, and techniques. And I think, I was telling Spiro this, I had someone in Cherokee County tell me the other day that they think that the Charlie Kirk shooting is what motivated the turnout in Cherokee County. That before that, Cherokee was fairly asleep, but then once that happened, they really were motivated. And that's something that you just can't account for something like that.
Spiro, do you give credence to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly voters were more motivated to turn out in that runoff, but when you look at the numbers of that district, I'm not at all surprised that the Republican candidate won. I mean, it's still a solidly Republican seat. I'm a little surprised the Democrats put so much emphasis on it, because a lot of times politics is about managing expectations, and this is frankly a pretty solidly Republican seat, and I think the numbers prove that.
Thomas, I want to read a brief quote. This is from Charlie Bailey. He's the chairman of the Georgia Democratic Party. And he said, in part, after Deborah Shigley lost this race, he noted that, in their view, Shigley overperformed by double digits over Democrats in 2024 in this district. Was that kind of the goal, to at least show progress in this race, do you think?
It's definitely showing progress. And keep in mind that you had 6 GOP candidates in the general, so you are going to find that support consolidating behind a single candidate. But if you look at the numbers, it appears that Shigley got more people out in the runoff than she got in the general.
And she didn't. When you run in one of these special elections, too, you do not have the benefit of a big top-line candidate on the ballot, someone running for president or governor. Is that a factor in these kinds of races, too, Fred?
Well, it certainly is, and I think to Thomas's point, I think that actually helped Deborah in this particular race. And this is a seat that Brandon Beach won initially about like 80-20, and then over the years it fell to like 70-30. So I think in this instance we see that this kind of election probably helped Shigley. Next year we'll know what the real story is.
And the PSC race is coming up too. 5 seconds. Right. Spiro, what does this all mean for that race coming up?
I think that's going to depend more on those local city elections that are going on at that time.
That was good. I had you clocked at almost exactly 5 seconds there. Guys, thank you very much. Thank you for sticking with us. We'll be back right after the break. Well, on a map, Georgia is a long way from Washington, but in politics, the ties are much closer. This past week, no less than 3 Trump administration officials visited Metro Atlanta. On Monday, the head of the Small Business Administration, Georgia's former U.S. Senator Kelly Loeffler, joined Labor Secretary Lori Chavez DeRemer at Gwinnett Technical College. They met with students and teachers to emphasize the contributions of skilled workers in the small business economy. Also on Monday, former Georgia Congressman Doug Collins, he's now the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, and he stopped by a Veterans Convention in downtown Atlanta. Collins recently visited with the leadership team at the Atlanta VA hospital complex that has, at times, faced criticism for its performance. Doug Richards with the 11 Alive political team asked Collins what he saw.
I believe the leadership team has the right attitude and the right focus to say this is where we're at now, while at the same point dealing with aged facilities and stuff that's been left for a long time. So I was really pleased with what I saw. We're nowhere close. And I know there's people watching you right now that saying, oh, that's terrible. He's just lying. No, you got to give us time to change the ship. We're 450,000 employees. We're bigger than active duty Army. It takes a little while to turn the ship, but we're looking at some good results.
Coming up, sports and school, they are both important parts of our community fabric, and our Voice of the Voter knows them both. You'll meet her next. We say it every week, you can't have the Georgia vote without Georgia voters. This morning, we are headed to Gwinnett County to meet up with Bree Smith, who's one of the Grayson football program's biggest supporters. This field is a place you've got a lot of history at, right?
A lot of history. I've been affiliated with GAA, Grayson Athletic Association, for about 11 years now.
And, you know, you got two boys.
Yes.
Both athletes.
That's right.
Sports are in your family.
Yes, we bleed sports, yes.
School's back in session now.
It is.
When you look around at a field like this, what goes through your mind?
The energy, the moments, the memories.
I think sometimes people look at football and I think that's a men-dominated game.
Yeah.
But you're here wearing a whole lot of hats supporting the team. Do you sometimes feel like, hey, you know, this is a space for women to flex too?
Absolutely, absolutely. But coming into the actual football arena, I was very nervous. I didn't know how I was going to be received. And then I never forget it, my mentor that brought me in, Scott Bryant, he's actually even more, you know, generationally been around longer than myself. He said, Bree, you've got it. I'm like, but I'm a girl. You know, he said, what does that have to do with it? You know, it's kind of like, you don't have to necessarily, I can't coach, but I can run the heck out of the program. And everyone says, do you get paid to do this? And I'm like, what? No, we get free 99. You know, my payment is the hugs and the thankfulness and the smiles on the faces that I get from my kids. You know, I tell everyone, I've got 2 kids that I actually birthed, but I've got 300 that I've adopted.
When you look at the state of politics, what's the #1 issue you hope our elected leaders will address?
Put more money into the youth, community spaces, sports, mentorship programs, you know. I feel like if we want to build like a stronger foundation, we have to help them get a stronger future, and it starts now.
What do you worry the most about?
I worry the most about the division when you look at like the political leadership level, you know, because I feel like I know our kids deserve to see unity instead of chaos, and they mirror what we do and what we say and how we react and how we act. So, you know, I feel like I would love for the political leadership, you know, in whatever office, you know, to come together and be as one and stop all the fighting and the bickering.
We always end with this question. What are you most optimistic about?
Oh, gosh. I know I'm sounding like a broken record here, but I'm so optimistic about our young. I'm so optimistic about them. I see it every day out here, you know, and I come out here just for football practice or games, you know. I see how these kids, they lead, you know, they help their teammates grow. They're teaching them, you know. You've got 6-year-olds out here that are, you know, telling 8-year-olds, you know, how to do better, how to go harder, hit the bag harder, you know. So, I mean, I feel like, you know, our youth is what's gonna be, it's our future.
Well, thanks for watching us today. We hope to see you right back here again next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.